Tonight we talk about the intimate lives of Europa Ancient, the courtly romances of Charlemagne's queens. Picture yourself slipping through the corridors of a Frankish palace around the year 800 CE. The air smells of beeswax and roasted venison. Tapestries shimmer with the orange light of torches. Outside, the empire stretches from the Pyrenees to the Elbe, but here, inside, everything that matters happens in whispers. You're about to see how love, ambition, and duty collided in ways that shaped history. And yes, if you were actually here, you probably wouldn't survive the hygiene. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Post your location and local time below. I love seeing where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the echoing halls of Charlemagne's court, where power doesn't shout, it purrs. Every step of the emperor's sandal leaves a shadow longer than the Rhine, but behind him, it's his women who truly shaped the tone of empire. Historians still argue whether Charlemagne's household was a moral model or a medieval soap opera. Truthfully, it was both. In a single day, you might witness the emperor receive papal envoys at dawn, kiss his infant son's head at noon, and by nightfall, share counsel or something more private with one of his queens. The Frankish idea of marriage was flexible. Christian bishops preached monogamy, yet kings had concubinae, unofficial wives whose status hovered between sacred and scandalous. It was politics wrapped in silk. Imagine a banquet in Aachen, the emperor at the center, his queens and daughters arranged like living ornaments. The music drones softly, goblets spill gold wine. Every smile exchanged between courtiers could promise a treaty or declare a rivalry. One queen leans toward another, murmuring about a new alliance in Lombardy. Behind them, servants exchange gossip faster than envoys exchange letters. What makes this world so intoxicating is how intimate it was. There's no privacy here. A queen's sigh can ripple through the empire. Charlemagne's advisors Alcuin, Einhard, clerics in spotless linen wrote moral treatises on chastity while quietly chronicling who shared whose bed. The emperor loved his daughters dearly, Einhard wrote, and would not have them wed. Historians still debate whether that was affection or strategy to keep their dowries close, and their influence closer. In this court, affection becomes architecture. The emperor's private chapel in Aachen, a marvel of marble and geometry, is said to echo with hymns and secrets. Each column might have heard a confession, a flirtation, a prayer whispered by someone trying to survive both love and empire. And as you wander deeper into the candlelit corridors, you sense that every silk curtain hides a negotiation. Every queen must master the fine art of smiling while thinking 10 moves ahead. Their world is one where passion fuels politics and where love, when it dares to bloom, must do so quietly between prayers. You wake to the faint clang of morning bells and the rustle of silk. A sign that Hildegard of the Vindsgo, Charlemagne's most beloved queen, is already awake. She's barely 16 when she marries him, yet her presence hums through the palace like quiet thunder. You watch her glide through the marble corridors of Aachen, her silver-threaded veil catching dawn's light. There's nothing meek about her gaze. Even the emperor's generals lower their eyes when she speaks. Historians still argue whether Hildegard's power came from love or calculation. She bore Charlemagne 9 children and empire in her arms and somehow found time to manage estates, arrange alliances, and charm bishops into obedience. That's the medieval trifecta: beauty, fertility, and frightening intelligence. Even Einhard, ever the cautious biographer, could not hide his admiration. You follow her to the courtyard where horses stamp in the mist. The emperor stands waiting, his beard glinting with dew, and the look they exchange isn't the cold duty of royal couples. It's warm, teasing, familiar, the look of 2 conspirators who've already decided the fate of kingdoms over breakfast. He trusted her judgment above all others, one chronicler noted. And why not? When the Pope demanded a war or a treaty, Hildegard often whispered the first draft into her husband's ear. But even queens must tread lightly. The court women watch her every gesture, measuring affection like diplomats tallying troops. Her laughter at supper could mean a duchy rises or falls. You can almost taste the tension in the air: honey, wine, and ambition. One quirky tidbit that survives in the records: Hildegard loved herbal remedies. Her rooms smelled of rosemary, sage, and something pungent the scribes couldn't name. She mixed tinctures for childbirth and sleeplessness, earning the nickname the Green Queen. Some whispered that her knowledge bordered on witchcraft. Others said it simply came from caring too much in a world that cared little for women's comfort. And then there's the legend half-truth, half-song that when Charlemagne rode to war, he carried a ribbon of her hair beneath his armor. Historians still debate whether that's sentiment or propaganda. Either way, it worked. Soldiers swore their emperor fought harder when her letters arrived. Her life flickers between devotion and danger. A queen's affection could secure peace or spark envy sharper than steel. She walks the palace garden that afternoon, her steps brushing fallen apple blossoms. Every flower seems to bow, and in the silence, she hums a hymn from her childhood, soft, pure, and steady. You realize it's not just love holding this empire together, it's her patience. And yet, beneath that patience, a quiet rebellion simmers. The knowledge that when her time passes, Charlemagne will take other queens. She knows this, accepts it, even plans for it. But tonight, as the torches burn low and her husband's counsel fades into laughter, Hildegard stands at the window, watching the stars. Somewhere beyond them, she must wonder if any story will remember her name as more than the favored wife. You sit at the long oak table where power, passion, and politics blend like overspiced stew. Tonight, the room buzzes not with swords, but with stories of queens and concubines, saints and sinners. Officially, Charlemagne's empire runs on faith and law. Unofficially, it runs on who shares whose pillow. You quickly realize that in this world, affection isn't private, it's administrative. The emperor's marital record reads like a strategic map. Hildegard may be his heart's favorite, but there were others. Desiderata, the Lombard princess he married then swiftly divorced for political convenience. Fastrada, whose beauty came with rumors of cruelty. And Lutgard, whose kindness outlived her. And then the unnamed ones, the concubines, women of noble birth, quietly recorded but seldom described. Historians still argue whether Charlemagne's multiple unions broke canon law, or simply bent it into a royal pretzel. You can almost hear the whispers of bishops trying to keep up. A Christian king must have one wife, they write. But Charlemagne shrugs, reshaping theology by example. Each match brings land, peace, or heirs. Love, when it happens, is a luxury. Yet, curiously, many chroniclers insist he was affectionate, even sentimental. The line between lust and loyalty gets blurred under candlelight. You glance toward a side corridor, where two ladies in waiting exchange glances sharp enough to slice parchment. One is the emperor's current companion, the other, his former. Their rivalry is half political chess, half soap opera. One drop of spilled wine could mean a duchy lost. In this court, you don't compete for love, you compete for survival wrapped in velvet. One curious record mentions that Charlemagne liked to dine surrounded by his daughters and their mothers, all seated in diplomatic order. It's part family dinner, part peace summit, part scandal waiting to happen. Contemporary clerics sputtered with outrage, yet no one dared challenge him. His charisma was, apparently, imperial. Among these women, affection isn't weakness, it's leverage. A queen's touch can secure a treaty. A concubine's smile can soften a tax decree. You watch Fastrada slip a note beneath a goblet. Rumor has it she swayed Charlemagne to punish rebellious nobles too harshly. Later legends painted her as a sorceress who bewitched the king with enchanted jewelry. Historians still debate whether that was misogyny or maybe just good storytelling. There's a moment later that evening when the emperor stands, towering and tired. He thanks his guests, kisses one hand, then another. Every gesture is both personal and public theater. The court applauds, though the applause sounds like calculation. Outside, you step into the crisp air. The stars look less like pinpricks of heaven and more like watchful eyes. You can't help but laugh softly to yourself because for all its grandeur, the Carolingian court feels oddly familiar. It's office politics, just with more chainmail and Latin. Still, there's something magnetic in this blend of devotion and pragmatism. You can sense how these women, wives, lovers, advisors, wove emotional intelligence into the hard fabric of empire. Their stories might be footnotes in chronicles, but their influence hums under every treaty and every prayer. And tomorrow, As dawn burns over Aachen, another queen will rise to smile through the same dangerous dance. You slip quietly through the heavy oak doors of a convent, where the air smells of incense and damp parchment. This isn't just any holy house, it's a gilded cage for noble women, whose usefulness at court has expired or whose desires have become inconvenient. Here, the hum of devotion mingles with the sigh of exile. They call it taking the veil. You start to suspect it's more about politics than piety. Behind these walls, queens and princesses trade silk gowns for woolen habits. But their ambitions never truly vanish. Some pray sincerely. Others plot in whispers between psalms. Historians still argue whether these convents were refuges or prisons. The truth, like candlelight, flickers between the two. You watch as a young woman, once a lady of Charlemagne's household, kneels before the altar. Her face is serene, her eyes defiant. Her name is Bertha, one of Charlemagne's daughters. Officially, she's here for devotion. Unofficially, because her father refused her marriage to a noble she loved. Yet even here, surrounded by nuns and relics, she continues to receive secret letters. You imagine her slipping a parchment beneath a hymn book, heart racing at every creak of the abbess's sandals. Convents like these were the social safety nets of the Middle Ages. A queen cast aside, a widow, a rebellious daughter, they all found themselves cloistered for their own good. But don't picture misery alone. Within these walls, women wielded quiet authority. They ran estates, educated girls, and even brewed medicine strong enough to cure or poison half the court. A quirky tidbit: some Carolingian convents doubled as literary salons. Nuns exchanged poetry and theological debates through coded letters. There's record of one abbess sending a cheeky verse to Alcuin, Charlemagne's chief scholar, implying she found his spiritual counsel quite pleasing. He replied with polite panic. You walk past cells lit by beeswax candles, where one nun paints delicate saints onto parchment. Her brush strokes tremble as she adds a faint blush to the Virgin's cheek, just enough to hint at something human. Another sister tends a small garden, humming a secular tune she pretends is sacred. Love, you realize, isn't gone here, it's disguised. Historians still debate whether Charlemagne's religious reforms truly empowered women, or simply wrapped their confinement in holiness. But as you listen to the rhythmic chanting echo through the chapel, you can feel both the faith and the fury beneath it. Some of these women genuinely found peace. Others waited, year after year, for a lover who would never come or a letter burned before it reached their hands. Later that night, as moonlight spills through the cloister arches, Bertha writes by the dim glow of a lamp. Her Latin is neat, elegant, dangerously eloquent. She begins, "To him whom my father forbids me to name," and you feel the ache that outlasts empires. Outside, the wind stirs through cypress trees, whispering like a confessor. You can almost hear the same secret sigh carried from every convent tower, a mix of prayer, regret, and unbroken will. You find yourself in a dim study lit only by a single oil lamp, its flame bending toward a parchment thick with inked loops and flourishes. Here, the true affairs of the heart unfold not in embraces, but in letters. In Charlemagne's world, parchment carries passion better than whispers, and every careful stroke of ink could mean devotion, defiance, or diplomacy. Tonight, you read over the shoulder of a scribe who pretends not to notice the trembling hand of the lady, dictating her words. She's a queen, perhaps Fastrada, perhaps another, and her letter begins, "My lord, your absence weighs upon the hours like lead." You smile, because even in the 8th century, long-distance relationships had their drama. Historians still argue whether such letters were genuine or ghostwritten by clerks to flatter both sender and sovereign. In the Carolingian court, literacy was seductive. To know Latin was to wield both charm and power. A single elegant phrase could turn a royal mood. A misused verb could end a career. Love itself became grammatical. When Charlemagne reformed education, he likely didn't expect that his queens and courtiers would use that literacy to craft love poetry. Disguised as theology, a quirky tidbit, some letters used numerical codes, where each number represented a word of affection, primitive encryption for medieval hearts. Imagine a monk delivering what he thought was a psalm, unaware it read, "Meet me by the cloister garden at moonrise." Those letters, folded small as almonds, traveled hidden inside reliquaries, under rings. Or between layers of embroidered silk, you find one such note, now a real one, preserved against all odds. The words are faint, I keep your ribbon near the Psalms. The scent of it weakens my resolve. The handwriting, feminine and steady, could belong to any of the emperor's companions. It's both sacred and scandalous at once. Historians still debate whether Charlemagne's daughters, famously forbidden to marry, were the true authors of many of these secret correspondences. The evidence is thin, but the tone half yearning, half rebellion feels too young and too daring for queens. Some letters even contain coded jokes. One writer signs herself in chains of faith and otherwise. The scribes must have chuckled before sealing it with wax. You picture the imperial courier riding through rain and mud, carrying what he thinks is a report for the king, but is, in fact, a confession of love. By the time it reaches Aachen, the ink is smudged, the parchment soft from the warmth of his saddlebag. The emperor reads it, perhaps smiling to himself, perhaps sighing at the impossible blend of tenderness and treachery that rules his court. And so, words become weapons gentler than swords, but far more lasting. Each one binds, betrays, or redeems. It's astonishing how much ink the empire spills in the name of affection. As the lamp sputters and the room fades into shadow, you realize the true power in this world isn't who holds the sword but who holds the quill. You waken Aachen to the muffled clang of bells and the savory promise of roasted meat wafting through the corridors. The palace hums like a hive, scribes hurrying with scrolls, guards polishing their helmets, and musicians plucking sleepy strings in preparation for another long day of blending pleasure with policy. This is the heartbeat of Charlemagne's empire, where the business of love and governance share the same schedule. By day, the emperor convenes councils in his marble hall, the air thick with incense and authority. You slip in at the edge, careful not to interrupt, as Hildegard, or perhaps Fastrada, now sits quietly beside him. She doesn't speak, but her silence is fluent. One lifted brow, one slow sip of wine, and ministers adjust their tone. Historians still argue whether Charlemagne truly listened to his queens, or merely liked the illusion of consultation. Either way, decisions seem to echo their moods. After the council adjourns, the rhythm of court life shifts like a change in music. The halls fill with laughter, and the evening feast begins. Trays of game meat, honeyed fruit, and ale the color of amber flood the tables. Courtiers flirt with the grace of diplomats. Each compliment carries the weight of a potential alliance. Someone recites verses from Alcuin's latest moral poem, which everyone pretends to understand. You hide your smile. It's basically a sermon disguised as poetry. A quirky tidbit in Aachen, the court sometimes held mock councils of love, where knights debated questions like which virtue makes a lady most worthy. The answers were recorded, debated, and occasionally quoted as serious moral guidance. Historians still debate whether these were satire or the proto-origins of chivalric romance. You'd guess a little of both. Later, music swells, harps, flutes, and a deep drum thudding like a second heartbeat. You watch the emperor rise, his face lit by firelight, and extend a hand to one of his queens. She bows, then steps into his rhythm. Around them, nobles watch, feigning disinterest but noting every touch. It's more than dance. It's diplomacy with choreography. Somewhere in the corner, two monks argue softly about whether dancing should be condemned as sinful. One insists it tempts the flesh. The other counters that King David danced before God, so perhaps Charlemagne can, too. You quietly root for the second monk. By midnight, the torches dim, and the great hall dissolves into pockets of low laughter and murmured secrets. You wander out into the open courtyard, where the stars seem impossibly close. The emperor's voice still drifts from the colonnade, discussing theology one moment and border disputes the next, his queen listening, responding softly. You realize the boundaries between counsel and companionship have fully blurred, and yet, beneath the spectacle, you sense exhaustion, the weight of empire, the endless balancing act between sin and sanctity. Tomorrow the process repeats: mass at dawn, politics by noon, romance by twilight. Aachen glitters like heaven on earth, but even heaven, you suspect, can be a little lonely after midnight. You wake to rumors rippling through the marble halls, whispers that one of Charlemagne's queens has done the unthinkable. No one says her name aloud, but you catch it drifting through conversations like a forbidden perfume. Fastrada. Her beauty was legend. Her temper, too. Historians still argue whether she was cruel, clever, or simply misunderstood. What's certain is that her heart began a rebellion that echoed across the empire. It begins innocently enough. A glance at a courtier too long, a laugh at the wrong jest. But in Charlemagne's world, even warmth can be treason. The court chronicles later claim she meddled in politics, urging her husband to crush a noble revolt in Saxony. With ruthless precision, others whisper that she bewitched him, that her rings held spells forged by pagan smiths. It's classic medieval misogyny, of course, but the fear behind it feels real. A powerful woman who dares to influence policy? That's enough to start a rebellion, heart or otherwise. You walk the corridors at dusk, the air thick with tension. Courtiers bow stiffly. Servants carry messages that never reach their destinations. Somewhere, Fastrada sits by her window, watching the torches flicker across the courtyard. Her letters, once tender, have grown sharp. He trusts no one now, she confides to her attendant, not even those who love him. Historians still debate whether Charlemagne truly grew paranoid or whether Fastrada's enemies simply rewrote the story. The quirky tidbit comes from a monk named Thegan, who swore that Fastrada once wore a jeweled brooch so dazzling it distracted the king from divine contemplation. Imagine that, a queen scolded for being too sparkly. When she dies, Charlemagne refuses to remarry for years, keeping her body near him longer than propriety allows. Some say it was grief, others guilt. Either way, her legend clings to the walls like perfume long after her last breath. You wander into the chapel that night, where a few courtiers kneel before the altar, murmuring prayers for the emperor's soul or perhaps for their own safety. The stained glass flickers with the image of the Virgin Mary, serene and untouchable. Everything a queen was supposed to be. Fastrada's shadow feels heavier here, more human. Outside, rumors spiral into myth. Some claim her spirit still walks the corridors of Aachen, rustling silks in protest of her vilification. You half expect to feel her presence, the faint scent of rose oil, the distant echo of laughter that sounds a little too alive. It strikes you how fragile reputation is in this world. A single moment of affection mistaken for manipulation, and a queen becomes a witch. The empire runs on stories, not just swords. And as those stories twist and ripple through the decades, no one remembers what she actually did, only that she dared too much. By the time you step back into the courtyard, dawn is breaking. The empire still stands, but its ruler looks older, lonelier. Somewhere, deep down, he must wonder, was it truly rebellion or love misunderstood by a fearful world? The morning mist over Aachen feels different today, thick with memory, threaded with gossip turned into scripture. You wander through the cloister where monks scratch away at parchment, turning the living passions of Charlemagne's court into tidy, moral tales. History, it seems, always gets its final edit from the pious and the poetic. You peer over the shoulder of one such monk, Brother Wolfram, his quill dancing across the page. He's recording the tale of Fastrada's spirit, now a cautionary legend about pride and disobedience. Let this remind all queens to obey their lords, he murmurs, nodding solemnly to himself. You resist the urge to roll your eyes. Historians still argue whether these monastic chronicles were accurate records or sermons in disguise. The truth likely depends on whose quill was better funded. Outside, troubadours begin to sing. A new song spreads through the markets and taverns, a ballad of the faithful queen of the Franks, who defied fate for love. You recognize her story, but in this version, the details shimmer like gold leaf. Her beauty is saintly, her sorrow divine, her rebellion softened into romance. The people weep at her tragedy, never knowing how many edits it took to make it acceptable. That's the strange alchemy of the Middle Ages. Sin turned to symbol, heartbreak to hymn. Saints and sinners share the same parchment. Poets smooth their edges until history forgets who bled and who wrote. You can almost hear a medieval PR department humming along in the background. A quirky tidbit, Charlemagne's own chronicler, Einhard, was suspected of being secretly in love with the emperor's daughter, Emma. Their alleged affair became the stuff of whispered legend. Later poets even claimed he snuck into her chamber disguised as a servant to be with her. Historians still debate whether that's true or just a medieval fan fiction moment, but either way, It shows how even scholars couldn't resist turning court life into theater. You stroll past a marketplace where a minstrel is performing one of these songs. To an audience of wide-eyed children, he sings of gallant kings, patient queens, and love purified through suffering. The melody drifts upward toward the palace towers, where real women, those same saints of song, sit weaving or writing or praying for deliverance. From those very stories. It's ironic, isn't it? The empire teaches devotion through tales of women who were punished for desiring too much, then sanctified for dying too soon. The storytellers call it moral instruction. You might call it myth maintenance. Yet somehow, their words endure. Without them, we might not remember these women at all. As twilight deepens, you pass a monk reading aloud to novices, and thus, Charlemagne's queens were paragons of virtue. Humble in heart and pure in soul, the novices nod dutifully, unaware that behind those virtues once stood women who laughed too loud, thought too sharply, and loved too dangerously. History will polish them, but their humanity still glimmers beneath the varnish like gold under candle soot. You stand in the echoing gallery of a later century, stone arches softened by candlelight, voices carrying tales that have outlived their tellers. Charlemagne's queens are long gone, yet their names drift through song, sermon, and story like smoke that refuses to clear. Their lives, part truth, part legend, have woven themselves into something larger, the myth of courtly love. The troubadours of Provence, centuries after Hildegard and Fastrada, claim to have invented the art of romantic longing, but you recognize their motifs: distant devotion, noble suffering, the exalted lady who tests her lover's patience. These aren't new. They're echoes of queens who once navigated affection amid ambition. Historians still argue whether the idea of courtly love was born in the 12th century, or simply formalized what the Carolingians had already practiced behind closed curtains. You wander among the tapestries now, each thread a confession. One shows Charlemagne crowned by angels, yet if you look closer, a faint figure of a queen kneels behind him, her hand resting on a book. The weaver must have known the real story that every emperor needs a quiet co-author, a quirky tidbit centuries after Charlemagne's reign. His descendants claimed that certain relics, lockets, veils, and letters had belonged to his queens and carried blessings of fidelity. Pilgrims touched them hoping for luck and love. One particularly popular charm, said to contain a strand of Hildegard's hair, was later revealed to be horsehair dyed with wine. Faith and irony, it seems, make fine traveling companions. Still, the legacy of those royal women persists not in objects but in archetypes. The patient queen becomes the ideal lady of troubadour poetry. The clever concubine transforms into the mysterious muse. The rebellious daughter becomes the tragic heroine whose virtue is her undoing. The medieval imagination could not resist recycling their lives into allegories. And honestly, you can't blame them. It's excellent material. As you listen to a minstrel's voice rise in the great hall, you catch the familiar refrains: loyalty, purity, sacrifice. Yet beneath the melody, you sense the older pulse of something raw, real love that once laughed, schemed, wept, and hoped within the walls of Aachen. The poets may have gilded it, but the heartbeat remains the same. Historians still debate whether Charlemagne's court truly inspired Europe's romantic ideals, or whether later poets simply projected their fantasies backward. Either way, the women who once maneuvered through politics and prayer now live as symbols of devotion itself. You picture Hildegard's quiet wisdom, Fastrada's fierce ambition, Bertha's rebellious letters, all blurred into one archetype, the woman worth a kingdom. And so, the empire that once ruled by sword and scripture finds its afterlife in sonnets. Charlemagne's real conquests fade, but his queens, his partners, his challengers, his ghosts endure in the imagination. Love has outlasted law. You smile, realizing the irony. The most lasting monuments of his reign weren't carved in marble or written in Latin decrees, but whispered into parchment, embroidered into memory, sung across centuries. You walk now through the twilight of the story, centuries collapsing like pages turned too quickly. The torches of Aachen have long gone dark, and yet, the shadows of Charlemagne's queens still flicker across Europe's imagination. Their loves and loyalties, recorded by monks and mythmakers, refuse to fade. They haunt not with sorrow, but with curiosity, How much of history was written from the pillow beside the throne? Modern historians sift through the fragments, letters, relics, a few surviving prayers. Some say these women were victims of their time. Others argue they were the architects of soft power before anyone had a name for it. The debate never ends, and maybe that's fitting. The queens themselves lived in ambiguity, balancing devotion and defiance like dancers on a narrow beam. You picture them now, not as marble saints, but as real women who rolled their eyes at pompous bishops, laughed too loudly at feasts, or stared at a winter sky wondering if love could outlast an empire. Their lessons slip quietly into your modern world. Every time someone negotiates affection and ambition, they're echoing that same medieval tightrope, a quirky modern echo. In some European universities, students still debate la fin amour, refined love, the idea that passion, when disciplined, makes people better. They rarely realize it was once a political tool used by queens to civilize unruly knights and temper imperial egos. Historians still argue whether Charlemagne's court was its seedbed or just an early rehearsal. Either way, the performance continues. You scroll through modern romances, historical dramas, feminist retellings, each claiming to rediscover these women. Some portray Hildegard as the wise strategist, others paint Fastrada as the misunderstood villain. Every generation rewrites them, polishing old candlelight into new glow. It's both tribute and theft, and you sense those long-dead queens might smirk at how little has changed. Love, power, reputation still entangled, still misunderstood. You can almost hear their voices drifting through time. Write it well this time. Tell them we were more than footnotes. And so, you pause in the hush between centuries, realizing the story never really ended. The empire fell, the songs faded, the parchment yellowed, but the yearning remains. Passed down in every story where love meets duty and refuses to bow. The past, it seems, still flirts with the present. Now the music softens. The narration slows. The torches go out one by one until only the glow of memory remains. The palace fades, and you're left with the steady rhythm of your own breathing. The marble floors, the candlelight, the gossiping courtiers all dissolve into mist. What lingers is gentler, the quiet strength of those queens, their laughter echoing faintly through time. They remind you that even in the most rigid worlds, tenderness can survive, disguised as strategy. Whispered between lines of prayer, you picture Hildegard walking again through her garden, brushing the leaves of rosemary, pausing to listen to bees. Somewhere, Fastra's ghostly perfume drifts through an empty corridor, no longer feared, just remembered. The ink on Bertha's forbidden letters has long faded, yet their intent hope, longing. Rebellion still hums in every heart that dares to love against reason. Let the world outside your window quiet itself. Imagine those ancient stars above Aachen glimmering faintly through the centuries, unchanged. Their light touches both then and now, as if reminding you that history isn't gone, it's just sleeping. Breathe in. Let the weight of empire fall away, the clatter of swords, the gossip of courtiers. What's left is a softer empire, one built on memory, melody, and the courage to care. You don't need to remember every name or every date. Just this, that love has always been complicated, powerful, and a little bit dangerous, and that's precisely what makes it worth studying and dreaming about. So, as the last words fade and the night folds around you, let your mind wander where parchment becomes sky, and the queens of old drift into stars. Sleep well, traveler of time. You've walked through empires and secrets tonight,